Hello and welcome to the BuildASoil YouTube channel. Today we've got Miles from Fermented Plant Extracts to talk to us about his products, other projects he's got going on, and bring you behind the scenes a little bit. Miles, thanks for coming down, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. It's great to come down and chat. It's really been a pleasure just coming through and doing business with all the good people here at BuildASoil.
When did it all start? Because I remember you and I had been using ferments for a while. There's KNF, there's Jadam, there's Fermented Plant Extracts, there's Fermented Plant Juices, there's like all these acronyms. So I'd like Miles to talk a little bit more about his process behind the scenes. But how does it work? Like, why would anybody want to use a ferment? Let's start there.
Well, so I guess the concept in living soil is that you have these amendments or organic material that's rich in nutrients in the soil. And the plants are going to depend upon a diverse and complex relationship of microorganisms in the soil to provide nutrition for them. I always say a plant's roots doesn't just grow down and like grab onto a piece of rock dust or a piece of alfalfa meal or a piece of worm castings. The plant's roots don't just extract the nutrition from the organic material. There's a complex relationship going on. And the lactobacillus present in the process of making these is a big part of just turning organic matter into plant available forms or available forms for other microbes, like just getting that process kick-started and base system.
It makes a lot of sense to me, and when you ferment something, you can get more out of it. How does that get to the plants? And we talk about large containers of soil. That produces lots of biology, and it allows bigger root systems to eat those nutrients. But what if you're smaller container? Or what if you top dressed and you actually want access to that? How would you go about getting those nutrients? So I want you to think about what he's saying and think, okay, there's something in here that breaks those nutrients down and makes them plant available. And he talked about lactobacillus, right?
Yep.
Where I've heard that before, correct me if I'm wrong, when you make like sauerkraut. I'm not like buying lactobacillus and putting it in there. It's just ubiquitous. It's like in everybody's garden everywhere. So how does the fermentation process start? You grow the crops on your farm, right?
Yeah, I grow the crops on my farm. A big one is comfrey. That's these. So I have a big patch of comfrey. And originally we were talking about selling the comfrey as dry matter. And I'm like, this isn't going to, I mean, like, it could work, but it's not going to really be the thing.
It's difficult. We had a couple people try for us, and drying it on large scale, when it wants to turn into compost, it becomes a little bit of a challenge to chop it, dry it, all that.
And I wanted to do something more, as you had described, something that we had taken from the forums and had experience with, because I had been doing these before even buying my farm. I'd been making these ferments. Yep. So then get the farm and kind of in this place of like, what's next? What's next was turning the crops into these. Yeah. And that was the magic of, because I'd already been doing it. Why not make it on a big scale? Instead of a 50-gallon drum, I'll make it in 300-gallon tanks and 250s. So that's where it came from. And the purpose of it for me originally was on my own farm to reduce my own costs.
You were dumping it in the irrigation ditch.
Yep, dumping it right into the irrigation.
Right to the head gate.
Yeah, I set up a ferment tank right at the head gate and like just turned it on and just, so it's a more holistic experience for me, and to like interface directly with farmers and get them brewing them and teaching people. Like you said, anyone can do it, anyone can make it. Not everyone wants to, or just learning about it empowers people, learning people the process. So what kickstart the ferment process is a sugar source. And there's not sugars left in these by the time they're done, because the microbes of like the lactobacillus, they have consumed it to get this fermentation process started. Cool. And then the plant matter in these is the complex food source that the plant, that once the microbe population expands, then they go to town on the good stuff, the hemp, the comfrey, the pumpkin, horsetail, whatever it may be. Yep. Each different plant that's fermented provides a different unique nutrient profile or nutrition profile.
One of the things that I know from a fermentation standpoint is, let's say they're all the same NPK, or there's arguably not a lot. And so when I first started learning about living soil, comfrey was really high on my list. Clackamas Coot had shared it with me. I looked and found that there was these different balking cuts of comfrey that were basically, they were like bred to be more sterile, right? So that they didn't take over your whole property, because that was the fear.
They only spread by rootstock.
It was this thing that it was like a legend that if you had comfrey and you fermented the leaves, you had this unbelievable garden solution. And so everybody I knew wanted to try it. My buddy Matt, when he first came to my house, when BuildASoil was out of my garage, he brought me a bucket of comfrey ferment.
Yes.
And dude, we never like brought it in as a product. It took it to full circle come back to you.
Sure.
And now I think that's probably one of your staples, right? Is that one in here?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, all these are the comfrey. Yeah. This is
This
hemp.
is the hemp. That's
this
the
is
hemp,
the
and
comfrey.
all
Is the blue.
Why do you have the different versions of them, or why would you pick different ones?
Well, I think each plant imbues a different specific, not just nutrition, but also enzymes, and there's all kinds of phytocompounds that are imbued into these from each plant. One big one is just the absence and presence of any kind of nitrogen. So that's where the peach and pumpkin and these come in. That not only are they traditional to use the pumpkin, but it's also just you're not going to have any nitrogen. You're going to have, it's completely different smell. It's a totally different.
Interesting.
You can tell it's.
Where the comfrey's more has the nitrogen, right?
Yeah, the comfrey and hemp both.
Stink in, stink out, we call it.
I mean, I don't like to make any claims, but what I've heard as feedback back from a lot of growers, even salt growers who don't use the BuildASoil method, they've told me that they've found increases in resin production, better smell, like just better overall flavor.
When it comes to fermented plant extracts, one of the things that I've noticed, ubiquitous within the industry, whether you're talking to, like you said, somebody in hydro, if you're talking to somebody that is full KNF, that's all they do, or somebody that makes all variety of ferments and has no system, all of them seem to agree that the reason they do it is because it makes better hash or it leads to better odors. And I don't want to make those as claims because I don't think there's been enough side-by-side scientific studies to say this is exactly what's happening. Either way, what I know to be true about living soil and about the BuildASoil way is it's based on death and decay and recycling and renewing and that whole cycle of life. So this brings in the whole factor. Everybody that uses ferments, though, seems to agree that it adds a benefit to the plant. At what point you would actually get harm from using these every single time? Like I don't, but if you make your own, and it's arguably free at that point. Let's say you didn't buy a gallon, because people buy this and it still lasts a really long time. But when you make your own, people have tried to go like hard. And I don't see like a diminishing point where you're like, I'm gonna burn my plants or something.
If you use it if you're using it real regularly like that, and I'd say just use that lower dilution rate.
Yeah, at a lower
because
dilution.
The only thing, it is a low pH concentrate, so the only thing is if you used it too often at too high of a rate, then you can run into a pH issue. But usually in living soil, these things are kind of mitigated.
In there, yeah.
That pH swing could be mitigated by living soil, but I like to tell people if you're using it all the time, use it at a lower rate. And as far as causing damage, I've as just as a joke almost, but to show the effectiveness and the safety of them, I've taken them and poured them straight onto plants, like in a little video,
Yeah.
and shown like the plant a few days later, like this is the one I put concentrate directly onto the soil, and here's the plant, love and life, no issue.
Yep. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about the application, why somebody might use it. I want to talk more about like the farm, the process behind it.
Sure. So I started out doing these ferments probably like 2013 was my first batch, and I was making them for myself. And then I moved out here to the Western Slope and had more space and like just the ability to do it. But originally I was up there by Grand Junction, and I was meeting farmers, meeting other growers out there, and I had access to all kinds of raw materials. So I was making compost, but I was doing everything. But then when I moved onto my farm in 2016 out here, I had already been shopping in the store. The store was almost brand new at that point, right?
It was, yeah.
And so, I was using BuildASoil material and stuff to build my farm up and get it started. And so from 2016 on, I was planting comfrey in this one section of my field and just keeping a big comfrey patch. And because I knew the lore and that comfrey was vital, and I'd heard about it and used it in the past. But I knew it was something I wanted on my land, even though it's impossible to get rid of.
Yeah, I know. It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's good. So that's what kind of started, and I started, instead of brewing in 5-gallon buckets and 30-gallon trash cans, I started brewing in 250-gallon tanks and really using it on my own farm. And then, at that point, we were just bottling it up and putting it in the BuildASoil bottles. Yeah. And then last several years, I started like branding it myself and putting my own labels on it and making it more of a holistic thing of the farm producing a product that goes back to other farmers, turns people on to the BuildASoil method, or kickstarts the process of people using some more natural processes and more natural ingredients than just the whatever salts or chemicals that they're using. I mean, this is a good entry-level product, I think, because it doesn't necessarily have to go on a living soil, but in a living soil, it's that baseline support of like bottom line that's necessary to kickstart those amendments and get them going. It's great for, as we were talking before, about somebody whose soil is hot and they want to accelerate, get using it quicker. Get through that process, because it's a compost accelerator as well. It's not just for like living soil with plants in it. We use it as a compost accelerator at even higher rates than what's on the bottle. The compost accelerating aspect of it is, I mean, that's what it's doing in your soil. It's accelerating the breakdown of the organic matter in the soil. So if you have a compost pile, it's just a pile of organic matter. You know, applying these directly to those compost piles is going to help break them down and speed them up and get it going quicker. Leaf piles, manure piles, anything you got sitting around that you want to break down on a farm, even in a bokashi bucket in a kitchen. Yeah, you put a little splash of this in your bokashi bucket, and it'll keep things rolling, keep that process going. So it's a versatile thing that I use in all those ways and more. And yeah, and even we're saying put it in the irrigation ditches on the farm. This is when I bought this farm. It was a whole new experience of like how to irrigate land in the West, you know, where it doesn't really rain much out here in the desert, high desert. So these ditches, like you just get a time where this water just comes through the ditch, and it's like a flood. I mean, you can the traditional old school way of doing it was just flooding the whole field.
Do you have a pump, or do you have like a head gate that you open and it branches off from the ditch?
I have just a underground ditch just comes in, and on my day I close it. Normally would just pass through. Yep. And on the days that are designated for my water, I just close that ditch off, and I'm giving all that water. And I even put bags of fermented, my stuff that comes out of here after it's done fermenting. I'll just take that bag and just dunk it right in that thing so that even it goes downstream. But those are all techniques on a bigger scale that I've developed and used in the past and implemented on other people's farms too. So.
Well, it's important. Let's talk about the Western soil. There's a lot of other soils that would benefit greatly from this, but we have a unique situation where we have a lot of calcium in our soil, but it's bound up in these carbonate. Essentially, picture it like this. Your water has a whole bunch of stuff in it that ends up locking the calcium out, and that's why the water's kind of alkaline. So a lot of farmers, especially when it's an expensive crop, like all of the orchards out here, they burn sulfur through what's called like a sweetwater system, and they inject it to treat it and really acidify the water. The reason why is that's not really the pH. If it was pretty clean water, just a little high pH, that might be okay, but it's super alkaline water, and it's full of alkalinity. And one easy way to mitigate that is to hit it with an acid, and it basically neutralizes it. And now the water actually is useful on the farm. And so one of the things that he's doing by using when you ferment, it lowers the pH, right?
Yep.
And that's part of what stabilizes it. And then I learned from all the fermenting books that it's safe for thousands of years. Literally, when you learn what like miso is, it's like rotting beans in outdoor vessels of nard.
I mean, coffee is the same way, right?
Dude, coffee,
bean,
chocolate,
right? Yeah.
sourdough, dude, everything good in life is fermented. It's crazy. When he mentioned putting it in the little BuildASoil bottles, some of you probably have purchased those. Maybe drop a comment here. Black bottle, little brown sticker. We buy them at like Office Depot, print them off the printer, slap them in there. Eventually we got like a BuildASoil white sticker, but it was because we didn't know what was gonna happen. And this was just the result of our conversation. And part of what I think I wanna drive home in this video is that not only are you supporting a small farm that produces its own crops and then is able to grow ancillary crops to ferment for themselves and share with others and then teach that story. And it's like, that's the vision. That's the beauty of everything that we're doing here. It's a dream, man. So I really appreciate you.
It truly is. It's so awesome doing business through BuildASoil and getting to hang out with everybody here. I feel like you create a really cool scene here just by like curating the vibe and the people, and it's always cool to like come down and do trade shows together and all that stuff is so fun. So you and Gwen both is awesome to kick it, and the whole network is like it's just built like just as you said, like a lot of business, a lot of work is like it really doesn't matter what you're doing. It's who you're doing it around.
Yeah.
That's 100%. Really what a lot of things come down to.
One of the things that I think people have mentioned that they're going to notice, and so right away people are like, oh, dude, I recognize that label. Is that something to do with Dr. B? To me, the way that I look at it, and I'll let him explain it, but a lot of his products are like paying homage to something that he really likes. I really love this back here. It's got these crazy, like you can just geek out and reading every part of it. Yeah. And I just wanted to say, I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's kind of like a bite in hip hop. How you like they would like bite another rapper's lines. You don't bite somebody who you don't like. You bite somebody who you pay homage to. And it's iconic of a culture the
Yes.
Bronners, you know, and
Yeah.
like I honor that culture. So this is the way I can put it forward and pay it forward to them.
When I was growing up, this was the like, they had like employee ownership. And I remember seeing Bronner like literally lock himself in a cage with hemp, making hemp oil, doing activism. And so that's what I'm trying to honor when I mention Dr. Bronners. It has some history in my life story as well.
One of Bronner's big things is ethical supply chain.
Yeah.
So that they can say all our ingredients are fair trade. So they did these microloans to farmers in decimated areas. And that's what you did with me over the years of being like, hey, anything you bring in and buy off that you bring in that's a product that I can put on BuildASoil that we know is good. I started out bringing samples in, being like, try my stuff, try it out. Yep. But then it turned into like, hey, I'll buy anything you bring up.
Yeah,
So
once you get trust.
that's like a
micro.
microloan in itself.
Yeah.
Is like anything you can bring me, I'll buy. Is like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, so like that, I built my farm on like our relationship in part. Like, I mean, I did a lot of other work, but these ferments, as BuildASoil grew, the ferment thing grew, the farm grew through the whole CBD and hemp bubble, and I've been doing more veggies and flowers for some weddings and stuff like that.
Energy flows, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I invite everybody, and I'm really surprised how few people actually get in. But Miles, he got in early on and was like, dude, I see it, let's do it. Yeah. So I'm really stoked to have him here today. We've basically talked about the farm, behind the scenes a little bit. From my frame of view, I know what it took to do all of this. I know what it takes and how much work behind the scenes he puts into it. And so let's finish this off with, if you had to pick two of these, I have a lot of people reach out to me on Instagram, hey, I want to use the ferments. Which two would you recommend somebody brand new, or what do you see as like most popular? And then let's talk about how to use it real quick.
Well, definitely the comfrey is number one. That's like the most versatile, all-purpose. It's my favorite for sure.
Okay.
And then for versatility, I think that the pumpkin, which I don't know if we have a pumpkin here. It's orange label. That's a peach, but yeah, peach or pumpkin is good.
Peach or pumpkin's available. You talked about the difference being like not the nitrogen rich like the comfrey, right? So if you had to pick two.
Peaches are nice and rich and sugary. Pumpkins are traditional, like orange flesh winter squash is a traditional brew for these ferments.
Okay.
So I think that a nitrogen rich one such as the comfrey or even the hemp, but the comfrey is my favorite. And one of these fruiting ones more made from a fruiting body such as a peach or a pumpkin is my favorite. And we'll do seasonal batches of different fruiting bodies, different ones that have subtle elements that are different. But these are my favorite for sure, the comfrey and pumpkin.
And I think you just keyed on something that I remember that I want to at least bring up. From early days working with the Guild Carindang website and learning about fermentation from coot, just, I mean, like before this was really a thing, I remember the discussion was, don't think too hard about this. Just think like nature. If you want to get something that's good for rooting, ferment some roots. If you want something that is good for vegetative growth, ferment something of the fastest vegetative growth with the most vegetative growth hormones in it, free of plant disease and pest. Yeah. Ferment that. And then if you want something that's going to generate and help with the flower side of it, right? Producing flowers and fruits, get something that is a fruit or a flower that is healthy and ferment that. And so it makes sense to me that you have the two options as far as like, hey, at the baseline, get a comfrey or hemp that handles your everything from like the veg side, so to speak, if that makes sense. Yep. And then a fruiting body if you want to have something more for the finishing or flowering side.
So on the bottle it says 1 to 4 ounces per gallon for like a container gardens. It can be used at much higher levels without any problem like we discussed earlier. It can also be used at lower levels, like just to really spread it far. You know, if you had to do some beds, like and you only had a gallon, it's like, oh, that's not enough water. Yeah. Spreading it thin is still beneficial, especially at the end of a season before the beginning starts. And all this is on the label, I believe. Okay. But making it yourself is really a cool option because it's really low tech. It's really not that hard. It could be done in a 5-gallon bucket, sealed up. It does stink, so you keep a lid on it with an airlock, and you should be pretty good. The stink will be keep it down pretty good. But keep it in a garage or somewhere warm enough not to freeze you. But you could ferment at 45 degrees. It's just going to take longer.
Yeah. I know you do classes. Check him out. He does some classes. I know you've done some like show up stuff where you like on the scene literally call people and you'll teach them how to ferment.
Yeah, I do little
maybe
pop-ups.
Maybe if people like do some demand, or if you guys want to see it, comment in here. Maybe we can get them to come back and do a little fermentation class some point. For sure. Not promising. We got it's springtime, right? So we're going to be both kicking off the farm. Lots going on. But if we see enough comments in here, they're like, yes, I want to learn how to make my own ferments. We'll bring it around. As far as dilution goes, you mentioned 1 to 4 ounces. I tend to notice it personally. I'll use like 1 ounce if I'm using it more often, and I'll do the 4 ounce if I haven't used it in a while, or I'm like kicking flour off and I've just top dressed. So that's how I use it.
Yeah.
You know, for what it's worth.
If you've just top dressed, definitely going at a higher rate, like maybe once a week at 4 ounces, is a good option.
Yeah, helping break down that organic matter.
It'd be cool, like you were saying, to do a class if we mixed up like a 50-gallon drum or a 250 or something for BuildASoil family farm.
Yeah, did and used it.
Yeah, and used it on
one bed or something.
Yeah.
Cool. I like the idea. We'll talk more about that. Let's move it on from the fermented plant extracts, which we could clearly talk about all day. There's just a lot behind the scenes. I mean, there's tons of books that you can buy on fermentation. I hope that if you've never really considered it, it's a big part of all the good things in life. And I feel like as a culture here in the United States, we've separated ourselves from that ancient art, and it's a little bit more like it's weird. But when your favorite thing is like cheese or beer or bread or coffee or any of those things, there's fermentation involved. So I think it's more natural to be closer to that. That being said, KNF is another part of this natural gardening system. And we mentioned fermented plant extracts. One of the ways that I think that connects to me is the newer form of KNF that I've heard about is called Jadam natural farming. And that's the extension of it where they're not using the sugars anymore. Like we had kind of discussed making these FPJs. And it makes more sense not to grow sugar. It takes a few years and have this expensive crop just to make the FPJ. So the FPE reminds me of that. But one step before that, so to speak, is Korean natural farming. That's what KNF means. And there's a number of very specific recipes and processes when it comes to doing that, right?
Yep.
And I think that what keeps people away from it is they go, I might try one of those, but like there's a whole bunch of them. I don't know if I want to buy all those ingredients, make all these things just to say I've done it. Is it really worth it? And that's where this new KNF line, this is going to be small batch. So if it's sold out, I'm sorry. But look at the BuildASoil website and you'll see these available there with instructions for use. And we'll be talking a little bit more about it as we start to use them here. But bring us up to speed.
So yeah, KNF depends on these preparations that are designed solely to feed that microbe population in the soil, to give them like what you're feeding the microbes they're not only are they eating what's in the soil, what's the amendments in the organic matter, but they're also eating what you feed them via your waterings. So these are like superfoods for the soil. I mean, like in traditional Korean natural farming, a lot of these preparations overlapped with food, just as you're talking, like this is vinegar. This obviously isn't packaged for human consumption, but in traditional methods, when you're making it yourself, it's kind of like if you made some vinegar and it's not quite tasty or doesn't quite go with the food, you dump it out on the garden or on the compost.
Well, now here it makes sense that we talked about Western soil being this alkaline soil, some of the acidity being of great benefit to the farm, for the orchards that are out here. And so I've literally heard of agriculture saying, like, just buy some agricultural vinegar and put it at the head gate on the farm, and your farm will go gangbusters now, because we're breaking that cycle of what was keeping it kind of desertified, if that makes sense. And you can bring cover crops, all these things that help improve it, but water is the source of life. So, I mean, it makes sense. What's the difference in like a living vinegar? Like, how is this different from what I buy at the store?
It's homemade. There's a specific process in KNF where first thing you make, what we were talking about was the fermented fruit juice or fermented plant juice, either one, FPJ, FFJ as they're known.
Yep.
So that starts with sugars and plant matter. And then once you make that, you strain off the liquid that osmosis is out.
Yep.
And then you have the leftover sugar-laden plant matter.
Yes.
With that, you use to make the living vinegar.
Vinegar, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's almost like a byproduct of the fermented fruit juice. And in a lot of cases, this OHN is actually made in the same way.
It smells so good. This one's been here for a little while too that you gave me in. So obviously the fermented in water brings a different odor. And when you have comfrey or hemp, something green with nitrogen, it can be pretty potent. This fermented fruit juice, I mean, I want to drink it. This is like, it smells like candy. It's really nice.
Yeah, you can make your own. You can drink the stuff you make yourself.
And the fish amino acids, I was really surprised. So that's another thing that you use as part of the process. And then we're fermenting fish, which, you know, if you follow the BuildASoil way, I use organic gem. I love them. And it smells really good too.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's the same process as the fermented plant juice with sugars and fish. There is a tiny super trace inoculant in there that's only rice, sugar, and bran, but the IMO 3, indigenous microorganisms, which is the baseline. That's like the inoculant for KNF.
The IMO 3, right?
The IMO 3 or 4 or 5, but the IMO is the baseline inoculant. That's your microbes. That's how you bring the microbes out of the forests.
And you make the IMO on your farm?
Around the farm. I did one collection off of the farm, but I'm right down by the river, so I have collections down there. Like I can do one now almost in February. But I've done them in the past on the Mesa, the Grand Mesa, and downstream from me down on the river.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with KNF, you can look it up, but you'll hear IMO, indigenous microorganism. And the idea is that the area that you live in has this terroir, to bring like a wine term in, that's...
Yeah, like a micro terroir.
It's like your climate, and it to me, it's natural to think that the microbes that are present there would be a little bit more natural to your climate. Beyond that, the whole idea is to culture what you have available, both from cost effectiveness, but also something better than that, right? Like sourdough bread, if it's San Francisco and it's made there, it probably has that San Franciscan bacteria or yeast or fungi or whatever it is that makes it a little bit more unique to San Francisco. Yeah. And even if you bring it from there and take it elsewhere and try and reproduce it, eventually it gets taken over by the natural bacteria or fungi that's in that area. So similarly, doing an IMO is kind of like the heart of the farm, and that's why making your own is good. However, a lot of these IMOs, they attract the beneficials that are ubiquitous. And that's why lactobacillus and all these others aren't going to be like new to a farm. It's just maybe missing if you have dead tilled soil, or if you have potting soil, you know?
Or if you chop and drop, or if you're laying down amendments, it's good for just, the applications are broad. And what you're saying about food and everything, it's just like the microbiota in a cave where they do cheese in France. It's like, they've been making this cheese in this cave forever because that's that microbioclimate of unique to that cave, you know. So it's the same kind of thing as farming and fermenting, and in all these places we're depending on and creating a symbiotic relationship with the microbes in the area that, as you said, are ubiquitous. They're there in smaller amounts and in lower amounts and in naturally occurring amounts, and we're just giving a little boost here and there, and supplementing them in patches that we need to be especially productive, or have certain longevity, like, we don't want to have to come back to this spot and do this for a while. Let's give it these treatments and make sure it flourishes, you know.
Well, I love talking about this stuff. The last one on here in my hand is this Oriental herbal nutrient. It's the most unique odor. I'll show you the label real quick. You can look up what's called OHN, and you'll find the ingredients are a little ridiculous to source on your own, and that's why a lot of people look to someone else either to make it or they take a class on how to make it. And so to just be able to have this from the man himself, I'm pretty excited. And now, he's not going to say that you're allowed to drink it or anything, but you can take a sip of it. It's not really a big deal. It's made for plants. It's not for human consumption, but it'll do the job. That's pretty good, man.
Yeah, man.
How many other nutrients can you drink? Don't drink it.
Make your own. Learn to make your own. The easiest one to make and use is this fermented fruit juice. You just get some fruit or something locally growing in your area and mix it with sugar, and it's like a syrup.
You can taste the licorice and the, the ginger and angelica. I probably tasted that. That's really good.
It's really nice and sweet.
So beyond all this, I know he's got a couple projects. It was fun to talk about the ferments, application rate. Is there anything else that you want to talk about between any of this stuff before we wrap it up?
Yeah, for sure. I do breeding. Been doing seeds for a long time.
I knew that before. I mean, we were even talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I was into breeding before fermenting plant extracts and stuff like that. So it turned into a clothing line, and now I have a whole cool array of all kinds of different designs that I'm constantly adding to on the website. Yeah, I do all kinds of different stuff, so it's happy to keep it in the culture and keep people aware of the new things and what we're working on and everything. So I try to do that all through the website.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, if you're watching, obviously we try and do educational videos. This, when we cover product, it's because we want to support those that support us and create that synergy and that teamwork. And so if you've liked what you've seen here today, buy some of his products, support the farm. Reach out if you've got questions. Our staff here uses them. We know all about them. We can share that info with you. If you watched season 2 of the BuildASoil 10x10, we also use those ferments in there. And I think that it's part of the learning process for learning living soil. No matter who you are, when you go down the rabbit hole, you're going to learn about biochar. You're going to learn about ferments. You're going to learn about composting. These are just natural things that I think it's good to talk about and bring to the spotlight. And one of the things I think is cool is they're not easy for a big chemical company to just flip a switch and sell. And so it's going to take local sources of farmers making these to make them available for those that don't want to be able to make them. Not the average family has the time or farm to make these, even though they're easy to make. So we could use more of these types of businesses, more of these types of products in every state and every locale. So this is a good jumping off point for you to learn about that. I hope that this video taught you a little bit more than just trying to sell a product, which we totally appreciate your business. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you've got questions, put them on the comments here in the section below so that we can talk about ferments, fermented plant extracts, anything like that. I know a lot of you guys make your own. If you've got a favorite recipe, I know we didn't really cover that in detail, drop that stuff in here. Let's create a conversation about it. I want this to be a place where in 10 years from now, we look back at this video and there's great conversation to be had. We reflect on it and talk about how far we've come. And that's the future I want to create. So thanks for being a part of that. Thanks for allowing us to do that. As always, subscribe, like, tell your friends about it. And until then, we'll see you on the next BuildASoil episode.